when you write a contract to yourself and make that commitment to yourself, you're only breaking that commitment to yourself. And when you love yourself enough, you find it very valuable to hold these commitments to oneself. And so it was a beautiful combination that not only did I learn to love myself, but I also had this little piece of paper that I still have it hung up. And it's just a nice little friendly reminder, right? I just committed to 1 year. That was it.
Welcome to Small Acts of Rebellion, a podcast where the unspoken narratives at the intersection of our personal and professional lives come to light. I'm your host, Heather Pridemore, your guide on this journey of discovery and defiance. Join me as we uncover the rebellious spirit that shapes our careers and lives. It's time to own your story. Are you ready?
Today's guest is Ellen Frazier, a certified peer support specialist, entrepreneur, and passionate advocate for sober living and personal empowerment. After achieving 2 years of sobriety, shedding 100 pounds, and transforming her life through mindfulness and yoga, she founded Booze Free Babes, a supportive community and coaching platform dedicated to helping women embrace alcohol-free living. Through her signature programs, 90 Days to the Empowered Babe and the Evolve Method, Ellen equips women with the tools to rediscover their strengths, set meaningful goals, and lead purpose-driven lives. Beyond her work in personal transformation, she is also a mortgage broker and real estate investor, empowering women to achieve financial independence through real estate. A podcast host and TEDx applicant, Ellen uses her platform to share stories of resilience and transformation, inspiring others to take bold steps toward a fulfilling future. Welcome to the show, Ellen.
Thank you so much for having me. That sounds like quite the mouthful there, Heather.
I really like towards the end when you're talking about transformation, inspiring others, because I think that's really what the hope of this show is about, right? Is to help people sort of think about the things they want, align with the things that they need, and have those transformations and feel inspired to do the things that are best for themselves, right? And so it seems like there might be some philosophical alignment between the work that you're doing and the work that I'm doing.
Oh, I sure hope so. And I'm excited to explore that more.
Now, Ellen, it's interesting. You and I have never met in person. We have a mutual friend. And so we met over Zoom for the very first time, and you were able to share some of your story with me. And so I always like to sort of point that out because people underestimate, I think, the power of networking. And I mean, and honestly, too, sort of the digital space, right? Because if those things didn't exist, you and I would not know each other, right? Like we might have a mutual connection, but the chances of us ever sort of crossing paths the way we have would be almost non-existent.
I'd agree with that. I love Colorado, but I'm not there often enough for us to probably meet organically. So having these virtual networking relationships is really game changing and very supportive. I think you'd agree.
Yes, 100%. So a lot to learn, I think, for anybody to just sort of be open to the possibilities of their network, open to the possibilities of the internet. Grateful for the all power of the video like conference. And yeah, it's just really cool to be able to make connections and, sort of build a community even from so far away.
Especially a supportive community, right? I would say that these types of relationships foster that level of support that we're seeking or looking for. And maybe we can't find that in our local networking communities. So it's important that we have those resources where we can reach outside of our local community.
100%. I think we're going to talk a little bit about those communities that we build today, Ellen, but I really want to start with some of your backstory, right? And so I think that many of us can relate with sort of the cycles that we fall into. And so things like work hard, play hard, rise and grind, all the sort of the hashtag hustle, but everything can start to feel like a loop, right? You can kind of feel like you're stuck on that hamster wheel. And sometimes what starts as sort of a short-term grind, right? So you're just like, well, if I just make it to the next thing, or if I just get to that next, milestone or that next obstacle, but before you realize it's become a lifestyle. And so you shared with me that you got into one of those, right? You had this period of your life where it was eat, sleep, drink, mortgage, I think is exactly what you said. And your work and your personal life really started to bleed together, blend together in ways that you didn't expect. And so could you just take us back to that period and just tell us a little bit about what that time was like for you and what that experience was for you?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for reminding me that I said that. It's so funny when I read that back, eat, sleep, drink, mortgage. I was just like, yeah, that's exactly what it was like, right? So during that time frame, I'll just kind of rewind just a little bit. Do you remember the global pandemic that we all survived?
Oh
Okay.
my gosh, how could I forget?
Just want to make sure everybody still remembers. So during that time frame, and you probably wouldn't remember this next part if you weren't in the industry, but during that time frame, we experienced historically low interest rates, and in combination with that, extraordinarily low entry level inventory. And so that created a little bit of a perfect storm. Yes, we were super busy, but what comes with that added level of stress? Not only did we think that the world was going to end, but we also had all of these people that were, experiencing a level of attainability or accessibility into home ownership that maybe they couldn't achieve before, right? So you have to think the lower the interest rate, the more affordability that there was available, right? And so I think what had happened is that we just got this influx of people, a lot of new applications, stressful moments, right? People are navigating home ownership. They're trying to understand it. Why is there a shortage of inventory and all of those things? Adding that extra level of stress during a global pandemic where we were already reaching for activities to self-soothe in ways that maybe were not the most supportive that we needed at that time.
Yeah, I can relate, Ellen. I picked up some bad habits during the pandemic too. I think when you were sort of trapped in your home, right, you started to develop new ways of living, and I think too it shifted like expectations. So, we here in my household, we love to drink wine. And let's just say there was a lot of wine drinking that took place during the pandemic, to the point that my grandmother, who also lives with us, she said every time the FedEx guy showed up, she's like, the wine delivery guy is here. So if that gives you any kind of insight into the life we were leading during the pandemic.
They kept sending coupons like 20% off, free shipping. It was insane. I recall those days very well. And our life probably looked very similar too. We went to Costco, we loaded up on our special Costco day, on the special runs, and that you could have certain things. I don't know if you're Costco limited, and this isn't an ad for Costco, but it just seemed like that was the joy that we got out of our day, getting out of our learning, working environments and setting off into the real world. And so I just remember those early days. It was leaning heavily into what could we buy that was already pre-made, so we didn't have to cook a lot of meals for ourselves because we're all working, living, eating, breathing in the same space, right? And then that leaned into some eating behaviors that weren't as healthy and supportive as well as, are we having mimosas today? Are we doing margaritas, or are we doing martinis? I don't know. And so just a combination of all of those things really started to pile up. And then once I started to see some health concerns, that's when I was like, okay, something really has to change here. I was experiencing some GI related issues, which I had had for years, but they really came to head during the pandemic. And so that's when I knew that I needed to make a change, and that the only way that I was going to make a change was understanding that I am the person that's going to save me. I am the only person that is capable of making the changes that are necessary. And that took great courage to get to that place.
Okay, well, let's talk about that, Ellen, because I think it's always easy in hindsight to look back and say, oh, well, I had this moment where I needed to make a change. But I think sometimes when we're in the thick of it, right, it's a little bit harder to assess the situation. And I mean, I think, whether it was a global pandemic or some other set of circumstances, I think we can all universally sort of relate with this idea that we have these moments where we sort of take a step back and we're just like, oh, I am not living my best life. I've got some improvements to make here. And this time of year is always a little weird to have these conversations too, because we're all like still in a little bit of a new year, new me mindset. What were some of those like red flags for you, Ellen, when you were sort of in the thick of it? Do you recall some of those moments where you were just like, I gotta get my life together?
Yeah, I mean, have you ever been, like, in a place in your life where you feel like the room's on fire around you and you're just trying to figure out the best route to get out? That's kind of how it felt, and that's probably quite the extreme of an example, but let me unpack that for a second because everything around me looked like it was failing, right? My marriage, my personal relationships, relationships within my family, I couldn't pinpoint one thing that was contributing to the outcome. I just knew that something had to change. And honestly, I love telling this part of the story because my therapist loves it. But I started therapy in 2021 and that was super helpful. I thought that for me during that time frame, the pandemic, we were over imbibing, eating whatever. I had gained a lot of weight during this time frame. And so I just knew that if I could lose the weight, that everything else would fall into place. And when I started therapy and started unpacking some other traumas and things that had happened earlier in my life, that's when I realized that it wasn't the external that I kept blaming it on, that I really needed to take ownership for the drama that maybe I was creating in my own life, right? And so, what I found to be really most helpful is leaning into the toolbox, right? Creating a toolbox that was helpful and leaning into those tools. So, my toolbox has evolved over time too. And I think that comes from the help of therapy. But one of the biggest takeaways would be adding Quit Lit, like Naked Mind or Holly Whitaker's Quit Like a Woman. Reading those books, I think I read those in early 22. That made the huge difference for me because here it is. I'm reading it in black and white. Somebody else is experiencing something similar to what I'm feeling inside. I can't explain what that feeling is, but I know that there has to be another way to do things differently. And then what started to unravel after that is once I eliminated the alcohol, then everything else started falling into place too, right? The diet falls into place. You start to lose the weight, you start to gain the mental clarity, and everything else comes from there.
Yeah, a couple things I just want to like pull out for listeners. So, did you call it Quit Lit, Ellen?
Quit lit. Yeah, quit literature.
Quit Lit. Okay, I thought that's what you said, and I was like, okay, well, let's just, in case people don't know, it might be worth just calling out Quit Lit. And then I want to understand where in your journey did your therapist come in? And not because I want you to get deep into all of that, but just like when you realized you were struggling, is that when you sought out a therapist or were you already seeing a therapist and that just helped you kind of get your head wrapped around this sort of life change that you were ready to make?
Well, what's interesting around the pandemic was also the time frame that podcasts like really took off, I feel like, or at least in my orbit, everybody either had a podcast, was on a podcast. It was like, wow, what is this new thing podcast? So I had actually listened to a podcast that my therapist was on, and she was talking about overcoming limiting beliefs for women, right? And how overcoming these limiting beliefs you're able to show up as a better version and a more whole version of yourself. And so I was like, that's what I need. I just need to overcome these limiting beliefs and I'll be fine. I just need to overcome a limiting belief that I can eat and drink whatever I want and I'll be fine, right? Boy, was it not that easy, but it kind of is that simple, right? I just had a lot of other layers of the onion that I had to pull back first. And so, how that happened or how it came about is that I started the journey to therapy while I was still very much actively drinking. And it was through that journey of subconscious integrative therapy, which is the route that I chose, that I was able to learn how to love myself more. And when I came to that place of really loving myself and then recognizing that some of the behaviors that I had were harmful and it was harming myself instead of practicing self-care and self-love. And that's when I knew that I needed to make some changes. And so she really challenged me to write a contract to myself. committing to 1 year of sobriety just to see if I could even do it. That 1 year was really important to me. And when you write a contract to yourself and make that commitment to yourself, you're only breaking that commitment to yourself. And when you love yourself enough, you find it very valuable to hold these commitments to oneself. And so it was a beautiful combination that not only did I learn to love myself, but I also had this little piece of paper that I still have it hung up on my dry erase board to this day. I still have it hung up, and it's just a nice little friendly reminder, right? I just committed to 1 year. That was it. Now, I'm still going. I'm in my 3rd year of sobriety now because it just feels so freaking good. But I just committed to 1 year originally.
Well, that's a great achievement, Ellen. So I don't want us to like keep going without sort of calling out the fact, 3 years is, what does it say? Nothing to shake a stick at. So congratulations on your 3 years of sobriety. Now, I do want to dive a little deeper because you were talking about how sort of this process of going to therapy and, stopping drinking and you lost weight. And so, I think many of us recognize that sometimes when you break out of one routine, sometimes that means stepping into another. And I really want to understand some of the shifts, like some of those first shifts that you made when you were deciding to approach things differently. So give us like, I guess, a little bit more granular. So we've started high level. Let's just like zoom in a little bit and tell us about that transition period, Ellen. What steps did you take that ultimately led to your weight loss and your sobriety?
I will absolutely love sharing this part of the journey because it is a journey. Learning to love myself was the first step. And then recognizing what I needed to support myself was the second step. And the decision that I had made at that time was that it felt supportive for me to get endoscopic weight surgery. And so the reason why I chose that route is because I was already navigating some GI issues and I needed to partner with a physician that was able to navigate some of those concerns that I had with my upper GI. And so weight loss surgery was definitely the kicking off point. Actually, it wasn't the kicking off point. It was just step 2. Let me be very clear. I had already made the commitment to sobriety, and I knew that it was a very strong suggestion with any weight loss journey that refrain from drinking alcohol for the first 12 months. And the reason for that is what we call transfer addiction or addiction transference, right? And so basically, we don't want you trading your food addiction for an alcohol addiction. Well, they didn't know. I just happened to be lucky with both. So I was really navigating some fun stuff in those first early days. Well, if you don't know this, your first 3 months of weight loss surgery recovery is basically a liquid diet. So I promise you're going to lose weight. But what made that really helpful is because it was also in alignment with my early days of recovery. So I was in a medical environment with tons of support. I had support with nutrition. I had support with therapy. And then I also had support with my doctor. So I feel like my journey of early recovery was a little bit different, but it was also insulated with so much love and support that it really was helpful to maintain that long-term recovery, which we're doing now.
It sounds like, Ellen, though, I mean, because let's be honest, not everybody who is seeking sobriety is going to go on a weight loss journey. But what I think anyone could take away from your story is this idea that, if you're going to go on this journey, one of the most important factors is to have a support system. And I mean, that's really for any journey. Anybody who's trying to make a change in their life really needs to make sure that they set themselves up for success. And so, if let's just say it's a small change, maybe it's just having an accountability partner. Maybe it's a big change and you need the rallying of your friends and your family. And in a case like this, it was a medical team, a group of people who could help support the sort of lifestyle changes that you were looking to make. And so I think that there's something there that all of us could take away, because the reality is like change is hard, but it's even harder if you try to do it alone.
100%. And I just have to add that my yoga community is the maintenance part of this, right? When I first had weight loss surgery, of course, they recommend that you take on some form of exercise. And for me, I knew that I needed something that I could do easily, that I wasn't going to give up on. I had already been practicing yoga for a while, so I knew that I could do it. And I knew that that was something that I was interested in learning more about. And so I perfect timing. A brand new yoga studio opened up like right in front of my house. I feel like it was divine intervention. And so the first year of recovery looked a lot like me attending yoga practice damn near daily. And through that journey and practice, leaning into meditation, inquiry, movement, whether it was yoga or not, just moving my body and feeling good, feeling better, having more energy, and wanting to move my body more, that just became a beautiful snowball that just became bigger and bigger.
So it sounds like if anyone's ever read James Clear, Atomic Habits, he talks a lot about like habit stacking. And so it's interesting, Ellen, because I think your journey sounds like there's a lot of habit stacking right at the very beginning, right? So you're on this weight loss journey, you're on a sobriety journey, you're on a general health journey, right? So like mind, body, spirit kind of situation is happening through the yoga and all these things. And you're sort of stacking all these things together. And, you know, you're making these what ends up being a big sweeping change in your life. It all sounds really easy, but I mean, the reality is probably something very different. And so when you think about those early days of like trying to make this big, you know, wave of change in your life, what were some of the like obstacles, or what were some of the moments where you really had to kind of like almost double down on your goals and your values? Because I can't imagine that it was like smooth sailing, like right from the get-go.
Absolutely not. And it's still not smooth sailing all the time, right? Life is life, and sometimes life be lifing. I love saying that, Theo Vaughn. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of ups and downs and hurdles that I overcame in early sobriety, and I'm still navigating how to just navigate life, right? In sobriety in general, because there's no more running for this friend that we leaned on for so long, that was that helpful resource and tool. Now that we don't have that, what do we replace that with? And that's, the toolbox. I know we mentioned that a little bit earlier, but tools in the toolbox, 100%. And I have to say, like, I doubled down and leaned in heavily to therapy in those first, and I'm still in therapy now. So, I mean, I feel like everybody can benefit from that. But in the beginning, I mean, it was like, I'm going weekly. I have the support of obviously the medical team. In addition to that, I had leaned into some other resources. But, this is an emotional, for me, it was a little bit of an emotional roller coaster starting out. I had probably been drinking for 20 years. And, that's not like learned behavior over time. Like it takes time to get into that new routine of abstinence. And the only way that we can navigate through those intense emotions is leaning into our toolbox. And what does that look like? Breath work. Sometimes that looks like screaming into a pillow, right? I mean, that's what it takes. It definitely looks like cold plunging. I took a cold shower this morning, and I took two yesterday. I mean, those are just some realities. Nerve flossing is another thing that I like to do. Anything to regulate the central nervous system, I feel like that's key. And for me, if I find myself getting bitter or not being in alignment. And what alignment means for me is being able to show up calmly and being able to process and manage the emotional flow of my day. I'm an emotional projector. And so, I love to ride this emotional wave, and I call it my superpower now. It definitely was not my superpower when I first got sober. I thought something was really wrong with me. And then I realized over time that I just was never really, I didn't feel safe in expressing my wide range of emotions. Now I can call my emotions a superpower because they really guide me to what is out of alignment. If something's not working for me, I'm going to feel it emotionally. And then I'm going to start acting in a way that is in response to whatever is out of alignment. And so now, I didn't know that a couple of years ago, right? Now I'm like, why am I having this reaction or feeling weird about something? Well, you just spent 20 years drinking your way out of whatever solutions you needed to find. Now we're going to find real solutions. And just recently taking this recovery coaching certification program, learning what recovery capital is and leaning into the things that are going to allow me to increase my recovery capital. And that allows me to show up every day without, being so emotionally charged.
So tell me more, Ellen. I'm not familiar with this recovery capital term, and listeners might not be as well. So explain what that means to us.
Okay, recovery capital is an example of what are those things in your life? Maybe it's social, maybe it's economic, basic needs, right? Like we're talking housing, we're talking food. What does that look like in your life? Like, are you feeling fulfilled? Do you have health insurance? Are you able to manage your household financially? Like, are you fulfilling your life in that way? Are you wanting to, gain more education in your life and things like that? And so in the recovery coaching program, we really look at what does recovery mean to you and what are your hopes and dreams that you want to achieve, right? And that may be something different for everyone. I've got huge dreams and goals, and I know a lot of us do. And so how do we get there? And so for me, what does recovery capital look like? Do I have a strong community, a supportive community of friends, family, all of that thing around me? Do I have a roof over my head? A lot of it might look like a gratitude list. Like, what are these things that support me every day and that I'm allowed to have and thrive and grow because of? That's a super high level and all over the place definition of recovery capital, but it at least gives you an idea. Am I feeling fulfilled in my day today because of what I'm choosing to tackle?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that actually is a good segue, Ellen, because I want to talk about Booze Free Babes. And I want to talk about community, and I want to talk about being a beacon of hope. And, you were just talking quite a bit about transformation, which we all know is a very personal journey. We all transform in different ways. Different things motivate all of us. But like, at what point in that sort of journey did you start to realize that it had the potential to be something bigger? And so what I'm looking for is like, you realized that the experience wasn't just your own, but ultimately something that could help other people. And you started to look for ways to kind of build this community. And so I just want to hear all about the sort of journey of what shaped Booze Free Babes. So tell me all about it.
So it's a selfish one, honestly. So I love saying that because it's really true. I just, realized that, hey, I'm sober now. I need to find some friendships that also are sober or, sober curious or alcohol free lifestyle. And Booze Free Babes is intended for sober curious, sober AF and everything in between, right? Because we want to be an entry level place for people to have that conversation. So that happened for me. And in 2022, I just created a local Facebook group thinking that I might make a few friends. Here's what happened. Dry January of 2023, we just posted that we were going to do, hey, let's just all jump in, try to do a dry January together, where our membership skyrocketed globally. That's when I knew. I couldn't believe we were just doing our own thing. Dry January. Anybody want to get together? Then I think we had like a Galentine's event, and then it just exploded. And so at that moment, I was like, this is something really special and significant. I'm making some really beautiful relationships with some amazing women. This has got to be something huge. And so I had to just create the space to allow it to blossom and grow. And it's taken off on its own. It's not within my control. It is absolutely universal divine alignment. Okay. That's all I can say. And so when the membership number started to increase really substantially, that's when I was like, okay, we've got to do something with this. We have got now this resource, this collective of women that are looking to us for resources and answers to really deep, difficult questions. And that's what charged me to go out and get the recovery coaching certification, just so that I am being the most supportive that I can be as a peer support. The intention of the group is just to be a resource for women to find modalities to help them along their healing journey, and also to be a community of women to come together and meet and congregate and, lift each other up and be examples of experience, strength, and hope.
I have I have an interest these days in community. And so, as I've been on my own entrepreneurial journey, coming to this side of the equation. So I was in corporate for a long time, and, corporate kind of has a built-in community because you work with the same people every day, and you start to find the people that you sort of gel with and share your values and maybe have your same working style or become great collaborators. But when you become an entrepreneur, you get to the outside and you find, hey, this can actually be pretty lonely sometimes. And so you start to seek out communities. And through that journey, I have come across these other communities. And so, for example, someone on the show late last year actually has a working club, and that working club becomes a space for community. And then just recently we had someone else on the show who, honestly, community's been not only one of her values, but also has been part of the way she's built her business. And so what I find really fascinating, Ellen, is like, you went seeking community, but in the process, you ended up building community. And it kind of reminds me of that idea that, like, sometimes if you can't find the space that you need, you make the space that you need, right? You self-advocate and you create the environment, you build the table, you pull up the chair, like, you make the thing that you need for yourself. And so I think that that's really fascinating, but it sounds like community has also evolved. And so you were talking about a lot of sort of resources, right? So we went from being, hey, we're going to be a group of people who get together, to now it sounds like it started to take on some structures like resources and that sort of thing. So I don't know, it's just really fascinating to me, all these different permeations of community. And I guess through my own talking, I'm now curious, Ellen, like, what has been your like perception or the evolution of community as you sort of like pre Booze Free Babes to like post Booze Free Babes?
Here's the interesting thing about building this community is that I didn't really anticipate the way that I would change over time. And so what I really have to take into consideration is the evolution of my own recovery journey, and being mindful that we're still a resource for people in early recovery. So, how do we cater to both? And how can we be supportive for both? And so that has been like for 2025, we've got some really big things coming. Obviously rolling out the coaching component after getting certified, that was super important to me. I wanted to make sure that I had the resources and the tools in my back pocket before I even rolled out anything like that. And so making sure that that evolution of my own journey doesn't disconnect me from where we started, and making sure that we're still catering to people that are on the sober curious pathway and looking for direction. And are we catching you at the time frame that can really help guide you to a significant shift? That's our mission, that's our goal. And I just don't want to forget that, right? Like, my recovery journey looks completely, it's taken twists and turns and ups and downs and all over the place. And now we're here. And we've got people coming in every day that are on day 1, day 30, year 1, year 20, whatever. And so how do we make sure that we're being able to support everybody at every journey of their path, right? And so that's what I think the beautiful evolution of the community is going to have. And then also being able to kind of segment that out a little bit, and having like your early recovery and then maybe some more experienced recovery that needs a little bit more coaching and handholding. So stay tuned. We'll see how this evolves. And so far, and I really want to circle back to, I've made some amazing relationships just the open door that it has created to meet so many more women that are serving in beautiful ways. And then how can we connect and collaborate, right? Like, how can I introduce you to the community, and how can, we offer more resources to help more women? That's what we're all about.
Couple of things I want to ask you about, Ellen. So the first is just logistical of Booze Free Babes. So as an organization, do I have to be in the same state you live in order to participate? Or do you have like regional meetups? Like people be part of the online community and then also still have some of that like in, like on location support as well?
Absolutely. So we are located in Charleston, South Carolina. However, our group is global. We're all over the world now, which is wild to me. And so we're very much an online community. Do we offer in-person local events? Yes, we do. I know that's a very small segment in comparison to the much larger picture, but my vision for Booze Free Babes is that we would have a chapter in every major city. I think that would be so cool. So I just said it. I just dropped it just now on this podcast. So if that happens, 5, 10 years from now, let's freaking go. Like, that would be so
Oh,
awesome.
why even wait 5 years? It sounds like something that would be very reasonable to expect, Ellen. It sounds like there's a real virality to what you're putting out in the world. The other question I had though is, you talk a lot about recovery, but we're seeing trends of younger generations who are sort of just not picking up a for example, a drinking habit. They're sort of dry or soberish, I think is one of the other terms that's commonly used. And so there are people who are sort of choosing this as a lifestyle. And so they're finding other ways of trying to connect with people and build community and sort of, find their people. And do you feel like for those people who maybe aren't on the recovery journey, but are still interested in living more of a sober lifestyle, that there's a place for them in an organization like Booze Free Babes?
Oh, that is such a great question. And I love it so much. And I love seeing this sober movement that's playing out right now. I have two stepchildren, and I see it playing out in their lives and in their friendships too. And it's just a beautiful thing to witness. I would say that the purpose of Booze Free Babes is just to offer resources to people, to women. It's catered towards women, to offer helpful resources. And we're on on a path for radical self-discovery, right? So that can be for anyone that's walking a path of radical self-discovery. And so as we continue to share resources on recovery, I like to point out that, everybody's recovering from something, right? And a lot of these resources are really focused on the 8 dimensions of wellness. And so really, when we're talking about coaching, we're coaching to that level of lifestyle. Like, what is it that you're wanting to improve in your life? And so when we look at it from that approach, I feel like there's a place for just about anyone that's looking for self-improvement.
Now, before we close out our conversation, Ellen, I have to know, because like here you are, you're running a community, right? You're on a wellness journey, and then you're also working in mortgages. And so like, what does the intersection of all of those things look like in your life? Because I think it's really easy for us to sort of talk about these things in silos, but the reality is you're a whole person and all of these things coexist in your world. And so, what is that like for you to have sort of all of those things happening all at the same time?
I love that question too. And I think that it's a little like this. Mortgages, that's what I do, right? Like, I've been doing that for a really long time. And I was in a very like toxic corporate environment. I know you had hit on that previously too. I did the long 20+ career in corporate, and getting away from that environment, I feel like was really helpful too, because I did leave corporate before I chose to get sober. No, I'm sorry. I left court. Sorry. Let me clarify that. I did get sober. I left corporate after I got sober. And I think that was really important, because being an entrepreneur and having my own mortgage brokerage, now I can focus on the things that I feel like are most important for me. Now, how do I make that like cohesive or crossover, right? Well, in the finance space, there is like a permission slip almost, if you will, for happy hour. And sometimes that there is a gray area between what is professional behavior and what is not professional behavior. And I think that a lot of times people can fall into that gray area very easily. And so, for me, I just eliminating the alcohol takes away the gray area first and foremost. Okay. And then the other thing is, yes, I am a whole person. Mortgages may be what I do. Recovery is what I'm passionate about, and speaking about it is what I love, right? And so I can be that whole person. I can still service my mortgage clients during the day and also be passionate about recovery at night and do yoga first thing in the morning, right? I mean, like there's 24 hours in a day. I'm a full person and I get to explore all of those times, doing all of those things, wearing all of those hats.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting because I think my opinion is that corporate, especially a corporate environment, really teaches you to compartmentalize like aspects of yourself, or at least that's been my experience. Maybe other people don't feel that way. And I just had someone on the show recently. We were talking about the entrepreneurial journey also being a catalyst for self-reflection, self-discovery, and so it is something about removing yourself from certain systems and frameworks that I do think gives you some ability sometimes to see more clearly. And so, I mean, even though, and clarify if I got the timeline wrong, Ellen, but you got sober and then you left corporate.
That is correct. I got
Right. So
sober and then I left corporate.
I mean, in a way, you were removing yourself from a certain framework, and then that gave you clarity to sort of reassess all the other sort of systems and frameworks that were happening in your life, and you made changes, right, in lots of different ways, and you were able to start really assessing what it was that you wanted for yourself. And so, I mean, I think there's such a strong reflection. I that word gets so overused, but like it's such a strong like indicator when you really kind of stop and give everything a hard look, you might decide you want to make some changes, and it sounds like you did. You looked at your life and you're like, I got to make some changes. I got to make some big changes. And you did.
And honestly, I think a lot of that goes to having the freedom to own your calendar again. When you leave the corporate environment, I don't know if you experienced that, but I felt like I would just log on and my calendar was pretty much set for me a lot of the time, that it was very challenging to create pockets where I could move my own needle forward. And so eliminating all of the unnecessary minutia that often comes along with corporate gave me time back in my day to reflect on what it is that I liked and what I didn't like, and allowing space for the things that I love to come back into my day. Like a lot of times you're gambling for the next 15 minutes of time when you're on a calendar that's structured in that way. And I'm still very structured to this day to my calendar. It's just that the activities on my calendar bring me a lot more joy today.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, to those listening, and I've said this before, like, I talk a lot of shit about corporate, but I actually think there are good things about a corporate environment. I think the challenge, though, is that, and this is just my hypothesis, but I think a lot of us are able to find that better alignment outside of corporate, because the environment of a corporate workplace is not really designed for that sort of agency and that autonomy, and we don't really always know how to best self-advocate in those spaces for the things that we need. And so sometimes it takes like bucking the whole system in order to sort of get to a place where you can find that alignment. But for what it's worth, I actually think that it is, people could find it and still work in a corporate environment, right? Like, not, if you don't want to be an entrepreneur, not all is lost. Like, you can still figure these things out, but it does require a different kind of effort, I think. And so, I think if I knew then what I know now, I would have probably just done some things different. So
I wish that I had the knowledge then that I have now. I probably would have been a better self-advocate. That's okay. That wasn't the part, the part of the routine or the process for me. I had to leave it to learn it. And now I don't see myself going back to it, but you never know.
Sure. No, totally. I just, it's funny because the part of the podcast is about careers, and I think entrepreneurship is a career, right? Like when you have your own business, but I also want to make sure that I'm sort of calling out and supporting those who maybe don't want to be entrepreneurs, because I think these lessons are still just as relevant when we have people who come on the show who are entrepreneurs, because I think that there's some perspective there that if you could gain that perspective without having to quit your job or to start a business or what have you, who knows what you'll do with it, and I think that there can be a lot of really amazing workplaces out there, but I do think there's something interesting. And I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Ellen. Like, we had these habits, we had these systems, and sometimes it's about just figuring out, like, how do I sort of get off this hamster wheel and replace it with a different set of structures and frameworks and systems that are better suited, better aligned, more beneficial, whatever it is that we're needing. And so, we meander just a bit, but I just thought it was like worth calling out there.
No, absolutely. And I could have mentioned that a little bit sooner too, about the corporate component, but there's tons of corporate cultures that I'm sure are very supportive, especially if you're walking a radical path of recovery. And even if you're not, I'm sure that there's some environments out there that, can be helpful.
100%. Well, Ellen, we are coming near the end of the show, and I love to wrap every episode by saying, if someone said this episode was way too long, I did not listen, what is one thing that you'd want them to take away from this conversation?
If you are having an internal dialogue that is challenging you for something more, lean into that. Find out what that is and muster up just enough courage to freaking go for it. You're the only thing in the way of you and the life that you always dreamt of.
Oh, I love that, Ellen. You've got to get curious about the things that you're feeling and thinking. I think that's a great way to wrap this conversation up. Thank you so much for being on the show, Ellen.
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun, and I look forward to growing our friendship together.
If you enjoyed this episode and are seeking to redefine success on your own terms, subscribe to Small Acts of Rebellion and join a community that celebrates authenticity and personal growth.